Hey guys, Dan Young here with Dan's Millionaire Code. And today I have a special guest. It's Pete. Some of you know him as Voiceover Pete. He's super famous on YouTube. And with our company Zydex, this man actually is super good at video games as well. Industry leader in what he does. And he just came to visit from Tampa, Florida.
Yep.
Tampa, Florida. And we're just vibing. We're hanging out. And he said, hey, let's do an improv podcast, and so here we are. So I'm going to turn it over to Master Jedi Pete.
Thank you very much. I don't know about Master, but I'll take Jedi. But thank you very much for having me. It is a pleasure to be had by you. Thank you.
Here we are.
As well as I just want to say, wow, what an honor to see this place and what you have accomplished.
Oh,
which
you.
led me to go and ask a bunch of questions. And I thought, why am I, asking so-and-so when I can just ask you?
Yeah, so just ask away. I'm super transparent. And the reason being is, they always say the truth will set you free. And truly that is to be able to talk about vulnerabilities, talk about failures, talk about accomplishments. And in that, maybe I can share some of that experience with those viewers out there as they're going through the crazy maze of life,
Well, I can certainly relate to a lot of failures. So why don't you just start with kind of the timeline? You started here we are today, but it's the journey that makes the difference.
Big difference, I grew up in Los Angeles, California. We were very not wealthy at certain times, to the point where we were counting change in the laundry room to buy food, and it was pretty sad. Mom and Dad were always praying on the bills, hoping they'd go away, and it was very sad. But I watched them slave 6-7 days a week, bell to bells, to try to feed the kids. Fast forward a little bit, became a teenager, got really rowdy, hang out with some rowdy people, did some really rowdy things, and then did some juvenile hall and some fun stuff like that as a teenager when I was 15. But the good news, though, is luckily I didn't do anything too crazy, so the juvenile hall people are like, hey, you can get out of here, you're fine. So I'm like, oh, okay. So what next? Utah. My sister was an academic advisor at the university, and so she's like, hey, you can squat in my basement for a little bit, live there. I'm like, that's cool. Live there for a little bit, and then she's like, it's time for you to go. So I started selling carpet cleaning on the phone, telemarketing. Hey, 2 rooms in a hallway, $34.95. Are you free this Saturday? And people would be like, cool.
Assumptive close.
So it was really great. Made some really great money, sold cars and stuff. Dressed up as a samurai at the swap meet on weekends, selling Ginsu knives and pepper gas and brass knuckles and, the weird swap meet stuff, Paperweight, not brass knuckles, paperweight. But selling all those things at the swap meet, right? And then got a job at Radio Shack.
No!
In the mall.
TRS-80.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. Huh? Some good games on
Oh, my gosh.
So I worked at Radio Shack, met my mentor there. Older guy came in with a ham radio. He's like, hey, it's not working. I popped the fuse in there. It worked. He's like, you are a smart kid. And I'm like, thanks, man. He's like, how about we go to get some Chinese food at the food court? I go, what do you do? He goes, I sold my company for $2.5 billion, and now I just kind of
Billion.
Yeah, 25,000 employees.
This was no schmo.
He's like, oh, So the guy, we started going to lunch, and he says, well, let me just teach you things about life, man, because I'd like to just show you what I did as far as the path, and you seem pretty bright, so I think as long as you do kind of a little bit of guidance, what I tell you, you're going to do just fine, dude. And so did that. Sold electronics still for a while. He's like, you got to get out of here. You don't get paid enough. It was like $17,000 a year, horrible. Radio Shack. So I think
they weren't known for well-paying positions.
No, but good education. Moved on, sold more electronics for a big company, and then they went bankrupt. They were owned out of the UK. So jobless. Got a database of 25,000 customers I had sold computers to. I asked my boss, hey, can I have that? He goes, yeah, man, we're out of business. I don't care. Take it. So they were all printouts, right?
No!
Yeah. So I pick up the phone. This is like no one had cell phones, right? So I was dialing.
Dialing for dollars.
First year, lost 25,000 in the red. Next year, we did $1 million.
You lost 25,000.
Yeah, it was crazy. So it was.
I bet you learned some important lessons.
Yeah.
Of what not to do.
Well,
But those are as important as the lessons of what to do.
Yeah, I mean, really, it was great. It was a risk, and it turned out pretty well. Hired a bunch of friends to come work, and things just scaled. And so today we have PC laptops, Zydex, storage whale. It's like online backup stuff, super easy backup, a real estate company, a bunch of other stuff. And so now everything's running cool. And the best thing about it is all the great people we can bring in, and just I'm able to maybe share some of my experience, and they can replicate as entrepreneurs. Sometimes they go off to be entrepreneurs, but that's fine. It's like, it's cool to see people do good in the greatest country in the world, America.
Thank you.
Because we have the freedom to be able to create things.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that's it, man.
So, okay, that's a whirlwind kind of timeline tour. Curious. You could have just stayed in a safe place with, it sounds like, PC laptops. It's going good. The plate's spinning. You got some stores. There's good momentum. You kind of rode the markets up, down. But for the most part, it's pretty safe if you wouldn't have stepped out and taken another risk starting another company.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it's just your nature to kind of step out and let's go for it.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't. I'm fear. I have fear like everybody else when it comes to like trying new things. I mean, the unknown is always like the unknown. But it's. I've never really stepped into the unknown, and people go, "Really?" I've never invented anything. What I do is I execute. So again, when I sit down, I've assembled kind of a interesting small team of mentors who have things that I can help them with and offer them some value and experience, and in turn they just show me the framework of what to do, and I execute that exactly like they spell it out. Because I figure if a guy can make $2.5 billion, like one of my mentors, then if they just show me how to do it, I could probably do something. It was funny because I said to Mike, my mentor, one of my mentors, I said, Mike, I'm not as smart as you. Like, you're really smart. He's
Wow.
like, yeah, you're probably 10% as smart as me. And I'm like, okay. He goes, but that equates to $250 million, right? And that's at the evolution point that I am now, he said, right? So he was like 50-something, right? And the weird thing is, I accepted that, and I executed to that, and it was funny because I actually hit that number that he projected. And then I talked to him the other day, and he goes, hey, I was just kidding about that. Actually, you're a lot smarter than me. And I'm like, no, I'm not. He goes, well, you are what you believe you are. So do you think you've evolved and changed in the last 20 years? And I said, well, yeah. And he's like, well, then you will far exceed me. And I was like, this is like a week ago. And so I've been trying to convince myself of that, So that's where I am today. And I've convinced myself pretty well. And the big shift, I just turned 50, the big shift is not to control things and people as much, but to put processes in place, put in people with integrity, energy, intelligence, and let them run with it more, spread their wings more instead of being such a control freak. But some of that control freakism was probably from some of that younger year trauma,
Right.
that I had to get over. So, and I think a lot of people struggle with that. When you're younger, a lot of crazy things and terrible things happen to you, and just trying to come to terms with that is a big struggle.
It is, and a lot of business is right here. It's a mental game.
Mm-hmm.
What you believe, do you live down to that? What you think you can exceed, do you live up to that? Much less than you have your environmentals, which nobody can control. The economy, catastrophes, pandemics. So when all that hits you, it comes back at the person that you are, and you're like, okay, am I going to hunker down and, fists up to protect myself, or am I going to go forward and figure out how to conquer this?
Mm-hmm. You're totally spot on, man. Like you wouldn't grow up.
But it definitely, I love what you're doing. I love the process here. I love the idea of mentoring. I love the idea of basically you're working yourself out of a job by replacing yourself.
Yeah.
And that's a great position to be in. So now you've kind of moved to a point where you don't have to be mired in the day-to-day. Good. So you can expand your wings in other ways. And as I understand it, you have a love, like I do, for cars.
Oh, cars are cool. Yeah. And cars are not. I mean, cars in my mind are just an internal symbolism for milestones, because you only can drive so many cars and things like that.
Right.
And I'm fine actually just taking an Uber or using my legs and walking. But cars are an internal milestone, and it brings kind of the inner child out of you a little bit, right? Like Matchbox
Totally.
cars.
Totally. You get in the Lambo and you were like, dude,
But
give me a road.
The cars are the most joy of having really weird, cool cars is when families come up and kids are like, Mom, look at that thing, and Dad, look at this thing. And I'm like, hey, why don't your whole family go pack in there and do some Instagram pictures? And I'd take the picture for them and stuff. And then seeing those kids, like, their eyes light up, going, wait, there's a possibility here. I could, And then the parents are, sometimes they have questions, but the kids will have questions. Well, what should I do? Then you can give them, their minds are open, and you can give them a little bit of seeds for them to cultivate. And it's so cool. Fast forward 10, 15 years later, this kid who was 10 years old is making $10, $12 million a year, employing 10, 12,000 people, and is teaching the same thing.
There you go.
So it's so fulfilling to see that from nothing, people become something in this country, which is killer.
I agree. Nothing's holding you back except you.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's awesome. Kind of a small little hobby for me, but perhaps much larger for you since you've been more successful at it, is the dynamic crypto market. I want a disclaimer that says you should not go there if you're not willing to part with that investment.
Yeah, and this is not financial advice. Just
Not at all.
Experiential story of what happened.
Knowledge sharing.
Yeah. But again, crypto is...
But what led you into it? What general advice would you give, or at least opinion, I should say?
A crypto got into it in 2013, 14. We overbuilt our warehouse. So we had all this empty space we're paying for. We're renting this place. And this customer comes in. He's an older dude. And he's like, to our store. Hey, I need to buy like 10 computers. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? And he's like, math. I'm like, for what? He's like, well, there's this thing called Bitcoin. I'm a professor. I teach computer science. And we're just doing a little experiment for the class. We need these computers to do Bitcoin mining. So I've written some algorithms and scripts to make this go forward. I'll be happy to share them to you. And we're just going to see how this experiment goes. And so he bought those 10. He goes, I encourage you in your back room here in your store to set up a few. And so, okay, so we had the inventory, so we're like, set up a
no
few.
cost.
Yeah, and it wasn't
Except a little power.
It wasn't too much for a few going. And so then I remember we were like, 1 Bitcoin. That's pretty cool.
No, you mined a complete Bitcoin.
Yeah, and then Bitcoin was worth like $50 or
Back then?
$60. So it's like, hey, this is pretty cool. This actually makes mathematical sense. Electricity cost to that Bitcoin, $50. We spent like, $25 in electricity, so it's like a double, right? Maybe we get this thing more efficient, right? This is with just a single computer. So we started building these arrays, 12 cards at a time, stacking them behind this warehouse, burning $47,000 in electricity. And
you went in.
Yeah, we started seeing like we're racking it up. So it was cool. But then Bitcoin dropped to 90%, and everybody was sad and disinterested. And so I was like, this is not cool. So I just stashed them in a way. Fast forward till 2017, took a run up to like 19,000. And then I sold. I took some profit off the table because we were way up, and bought a bunch of real estate.
Did you have all those Bitcoins way back then?
Mm-hmm.
You kept them?
Yeah, but sold 75% when it took a run.
Oh, okay.
Which was great.
But still, what a net.
What a good run up.
What a net that would have been.
Yeah, and so then kept some, and then bought a bunch of buildings with what we sold. So until to this day, I still do a lot with cryptocurrency. I think it's pretty cool. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
With that kind of success, yes. But then you hear the other guys, they bought it the wrong time, market falls, and they're like, I'm out all this money.
Yeah. But that's like stocks, or real estate, or anything. I mean, my theory for any investment that I do personally now is dollar cost averaging. And so I set aside a fixed amount that I wouldn't stress about if I would lose. I pick my investment, and I buy that fixed amount every single month. and I don't sweat it, And again, if I went to 0, well, no stress. That's, a little stress, but it's still what it is. But continue to accumulate,
Because you're ahead in the long run.
Uh,
You're down that day.
Well, theoretically, but anything in life is a risk, So. No big secret to it.
I applaud the risk taking, especially when it's successful. So you appear to me to be a good family man. I'd like to think of myself as a good family man. Been married 30 some odd years and have 2 great sons. I'm the biased dad, I admit it. Love them to death. Think the world of them. You strike me that you're very similar in that way.
No, you try to be a good dad. Just show your kids kind of like the 3 basic principles: integrity, energy, intelligence. And if they can execute on that, as long as you're not, again, too controlling and letting them, and not being a helicopter parent too much, letting them do what their dreams are.
Would you explain that just for a moment?
Well, you can be a helicopter parent, or you
What
can
is a helicopter parent?
somebody who just kind of hovers and like micromanages everything, which was still a big problem of mine sometimes. But letting go of that and letting them think on their own, that's a tough one.
I agree with that. And for me, when I came to that sort of moment, or I felt like voiceover wife was going toward that moment, I would try to step back and say, no, if it doesn't physically hurt them or traumatize them, let's let them make a mistake here.
Smart.
When, one of my sons is climbing up the tree, hanging upside down, he's only 4 feet high. If he falls, he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Let him make some mistakes. And that, in my opinion, was a good growth moment, not just for us as parents. Let him fail, in a right scenario, if there is such a thing. But don't hover over them where you're going to coddle them and give them ribbons for just showing up.
But you don't want to do that, Did you watch the movie 300? Okay, so there's like that super general guy and his son is in it.
Yes.
And he trains his son actually fairly well.
Yes.
But he's always there to kind of overwatch, a little bit of micromanaging. And then he ends up fighting the bad guys or whatever. And then after the battle, or mid-battle, he puts his sword down and he gets his head cut off by this enemy, right? And that's because he didn't teach him to be on his own guard and his own power, which is an incredible lesson. I told my son that. I said, I want you to be able to be aware from your own experience, though. And part of that is kind of from the noob training up to the advanced. But if you skip all those levels up to like level 120, or whatever the highest level is now, then more bad things will happen, though, because people won't be able to protect themselves and be able to create on their own. So I think conceptually that really that struck me, that movie. I was like, whoa. So you want your children to be powerful on their own. In fact, you want them to be, your hope is they'd be better than you.
Amen. Amen.
Be like, man, my dad, he's great, but he did this and that, and we're going to do it this other way.
Absolutely, 1,000%.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my son to be as good as me. I want them both to be better than me.
That's right. That's what it's about, huh?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, awesome, great. Our sons hopefully will long outlive us and outproduce what we've accomplished. One thing it seems like we also share in common, didn't realize we were so much alike, did you, is I love and surprisingly cherish our puppy, voiceover puppy. She's a beautiful black lab.
Ooh.
Love her to death. Everybody she greets is her new best friend. And it seems like you too share a love.
Dogs are cool because they don't judge you. They're usually fairly just free and happy-spirited and those kind of things. You got to nurture them well, but dogs are cool.
But it sounds like you're not a lab lover, which is fine. I won't
No, I like labs.
put
Labs
you
are
down
good.
too much for that.
Labs, pugs.
But pugs, I understand.
Yeah. Well, mainly because they don't require a lot of physical activity. Even though I like to exercise, but you're not mandatorily obligated to take them on massive 12-mile marathons, half marathons, or whatever that is.
Well, it's not a Great Dane, but yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love the little creatures. They're cool. They're smart, and they bring joy.
They do. They do. You greet them anytime, day or night. Their tongue's hanging, at least mine, puppy's tongue is hanging out going, "Hi, Dad, let's go play."
Yeah.
That's it. So
We all strive to be that way, huh?
we do. And there's a whole lesson in, why can't we be more like puppies, right?
Yeah.
The spouse comes home and you sit there and go, "It is great to see you. Let's play." We'd have a different world if we all treated each other as such.
Sometimes it's doghouse. That's good.
Let's not go there.
Okay.
But that's pretty much what I wanted to ask you today. To just
Cool.
kind of walk through just some of the milestones that you've hit, and thank you for sharing.
Just want to help people, and and you guys out there, follow Pete. He's like just a very huge well of wisdom. And what's really cool is he's got the three things: energy, integrity, intelligence. And I think he can give all of us an interesting perspective on that. So down below, we'll put a link. You can say hi to Pete. He'll be doing a lot of collabs with Zydex, our computer company, as well. He's a big fan. And one thing I like about Pete is he really does what's right. He does his diligence. He feels people out, and he always moves himself towards being with people that are good people. And he's smart. I mean, he sees the things. And that's important for you guys to do. Do your diligence on any project you're getting involved with. Luckily, we have Google, and you can find out people's history. And good people leave positive, good things in their wake, typically. Not that they don't have their mistakes, but people will leave usually great accomplishments and good things for people in their wake. Bad people will typically leave a lot of death and destruction in their wake. So this is a man that's on the light side of the force. So thanks, Pete, for coming on.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's an honor.
We'll see you guys next week.